For 10 years, Adaku endured the unbearable pain of barrenness. Each passing year weighed on her spirit, and her mother-in-law, Mama Chiki, didn't make life easier. The insults were relentless. "A barren tree has no place in this family," she would sneer, her words cutting like knives. Adaku's heart ached with every taunt, but she refused to give up hope. Night after night, she poured her soul into prayers, crying out to the heavens for a miracle. And then it happened. After 10 long years, Adaku's prayers were answered. She gave birth to a baby boy, Jeel. The moment she cradled him in her arms, her joy knew no bounds. Her shame had turned to glory, her tears into laughter. Jeel wasn't just her child, he was her miracle, her vindication against all who had mocked her. "God has finally heard my cry," Adaku whispered tearfully as she gazed at her newborn. Her husband, Jeel, was overjoyed as well, though his happiness was tempered by his practical nature. He thanked the heavens but silently worried about the undue pressure Adaku might place on their son. Adaku, however, had no reservations. She vowed to do everything in her power to protect and love Jeel. "This child is my ward," she declared. "No one will harm him, not even in the slightest." From the moment Adaku and Jeel returned home from the hospital, she set strict rules for everyone in the household. She summoned the domestic staff and issued a stern warning. "This is a message for all of you. Be very careful with my son. Don't touch him unnecessarily. Don't scold him. If anything goes wrong, you report to me, and only me. Do you hear me?" The staff nodded nervously, sensing the seriousness in her tone. Adaku wasn't bluffing. She kept a hawk's eye on anyone who came near Jeel, ready to fire anyone who even slightly mishandled him or his belongings. Her love for Jeel knew no bounds, but it also began to show cracks in its intensity. As Jeel grew, he clung to his mother with a grip that only tightened over time. By the age of 3, he refused to play with the other children in the compound. He followed Adaku everywhere she went, tugging at her wrapper and demanding her attention. If she dared to sit with her husband and laugh at one of his jokes, Jeel would stomp his feet, scream, and cry until she returned her focus to him. Jeel tried to intervene. "Adaku, you're spoiling this boy," he said one evening after a particularly loud tantrum. "He's just a child," Adaku replied dismissively. "He's showing his love for me. Why are you jealous?" "Jealous?" Jeel's voice rose. "Adaku, a chick that stays too long under its mother's wings forgets how to fly. This boy needs independence. Let him grow." But Adaku brushed off his warnings. "You don't understand. Jeel is my miracle. I won't let anything come between us." As Jeel entered primary school, his attachment to Adaku became even more pronounced. He insisted on sitting in her lap during meals, holding her hand as she walked, and even sleeping in her bed when Cherry was away. Whenever anyone attempted to discipline him, he would run to Adaku, who would immediately defend him. "He's just a boy," she would say, waving off concerns from neighbors and teachers alike. But the signs were there, small, troubling signs that others couldn't ignore. Jeel refused to play with his peers, preferring to stay by Adaku's side. He became increasingly territorial, throwing tantrums whenever Cherry showed affection toward her. One day, Mama A, Adaku's mother, visited the family. She observed the strange bond between her daughter and grandson and decided to speak up. "Adaku, what is this I hear about you showering with Jeel?" Mama A asked bluntly. "Mama, he's just a child," Adaku replied, brushing off the concern. "He doesn't know the difference between right and wrong." "That may be true now," Mama A said gravely, "but children grow, Adaku. They learn from what they see. Mark my words, this attachment is unhealthy." Cherry, who had overheard the conversation, joined in. "I've been saying this for years, Mama, but she won't listen. She thinks I'm jealous." Adaku folded her arms stubbornly. "You're making something out of nothing. My son loves me, and I love him. What's wrong with that? If you are enjoying, then kindly subscribe to this channel, like the video and leave a comment. Mama sighed, but she could see that her daughter's mind was made up. By the time Jeel turned 10, the innocent bond between mother and son had begun to morph into something darker. Jeel had become possessive, aggressive, and deeply territorial. He glared at anyone who got too close to his mother and would often interrupt conversations to demand her attention. One afternoon, the family's neighbor, Mr. Oko, made a casual remark while greeting Adaku. "Oh, as beautiful as always," he said with a smile. Jeel, who was nearby, froze. His expression darkened, and before anyone could react, he lunged at Mr. Oko, shoving him against the wall. "Don't talk to her like that," he shouted. Chiai rushed to intervene, pulling Jeel away. "What's wrong with you?" he yelled. Jeel said nothing, his fist clenched tightly as he glared at Mr. Oko. Adaku, instead of reprimanding her son, held him close and whispered, "It's okay, my love. Don't let anyone upset you." That night, Chiai confronted Adaku. "Do you see it now? This isn't love, Adaku. This is obsession. He's not acting like your son, he's acting like a man fighting for his wife." Adaku rolled her eyes. "You're overreacting, Chiai. He's just protective of me." Chiai slammed his fist on the table. "Protective? Adaku, this boy brings you flowers and calls you his queen. What child does that? You need to stop encouraging this behavior before it's too late." But Adaku refused to listen. She laughed off Chiai's concerns, convinced that her son's actions were nothing more than a display of love. Unbeknownst to her, the seeds of a deeper problem had already taken root. As the days passed, the atmosphere in the house grew tense. Adaku had hoped, with every ounce of her being, that things would return to normal, that the strange, obsessive attachment Jeel had developed for her would fade. But as much as she prayed for it, the truth became undeniable. Her blind love and overindulgence had set something in motion that she could no longer control. Jeel's behavior became increasingly erratic, and no matter how hard she tried to explain it away, there was no ignoring the gravity of the situation. His once innocent attachment had turned into something far more sinister, and Adaku was beginning to see it for what it truly was. Jeel's obsession grew worse with each passing day. It wasn't enough for him to simply be in his mother's presence, he needed to possess her. It wasn't just the flowers and the strange gifts anymore. Jeel began following Adaku wherever she went, making sure he was always at her side. If she attended a family gathering, he was there. If she visited a friend, he would show up uninvited. His presence, at first subtle, began to suffocate her. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Adaku found herself retreating to the garden, hoping to find some peace and quiet. She sat alone on a bench, watching the moon rise in the sky, her mind spinning with the impossibility of her situation. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breath, when she suddenly felt a presence beside her. "Mom, why do you leave me alone?" Jeel's voice cut through the silence, his tone accusing. Adaku opened her eyes to see Jeel standing in front of her, his gaze intense and unblinking. He was no longer the sweet boy who had once been her everything.